Stephane Ceretti, Alexis Wajsbrot, Guy Williams, and Theo Bialek. You guys were the visual effects team behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which has a lot of new locations and a lot of animals. Steph, I'm going to start with you. You were the overall supervisor, and you did the first film, set out the second. So what was it like returning to close out the trilogy and bringing everyone from all these different VFX houses on board?
Yeah, I mean, it was very exciting to come back and work with James and the team again because it's all pretty much the same team, since the first one. Obviously, we shot this one in Atlanta, but a lot of the key personnel was the same people and some new ones. But it was great. I mean, coming back to do this and do the end of the Guardians trilogy was very exciting for me. And reworking with the actors and the characters that we had created for the first film was super exciting. And we were very excited to bring some of our best friends in the business that some of them had worked with us before. The people from Framestore, we really worked a lot on the first one to create Rocket, and it made sense to bring them back. And James really likes working with them. Guy was there as well. From what I had worked with James before, I think Guy, you did the second one as well, right? With James, yeah. Yes. And ImageWorks, which was a newcomer, but they had done work with us before on other shows, and we really like working with Theo. So it was a good group of people we knew that could deliver James' vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this film is so much about Rocket and his life story, and we have flashbacks to when he was a baby raccoon, and then all the experiments on him. Alexis, what was it like working on Rocket and showing him at all these different stages of his life?
It's been an amazing experience to come back to Rocket because, as Steph said, at Framestore, we already worked on Guardians 1, where we had to digitally build Rocket and finding the right mix between a raccoon and a human and of course a comic, and we worked that very close to Steph and James on the first one, and then on this one it was telling his backstory and how did it transform from a real raccoon, even if Rocket doesn't like to be named a raccoon, to Rocket Raccoon that we all know. So I think we did a lot of iteration. We started actually by finding a really cute raccoon, and we created that, which we called Rocket Runt, and that was the starting point. And then we actually did blend shape to the actual Rocket we all know, and we started to look at which different phase would be interesting. There were also some great sketch from James Gunn, from the production designer, from the art department at Marvel, that we also used as reference. And then we knew the different scales that this character needed to be. So the Rocket baby, Rocket adolescent, the adult. And then regarding the implants, it was about, we know that the main thing is he needs to go from a character on all four that works on all four to a bipedal character. So what kind of implants would help that transition, that transformation? So we had these implants to, of course, extrude the shoulders to be more human. We had something for the thumb to be a bit more human, something to stretch his legs as well. So all of these kind of implants to make him more real. But I think the main thing for us was really the animation and trying to find the emotion into Sean Gunn body performance, Bradley Cooper facial performance, as well as bringing a bit of Steph is always trying to bring a bit of the animalistic nature of the raccoon as well. And the more baby he is, the more raccoon he's supposed to be, and the more bent forward on all four he's supposed to be. And then the more he grows up, the more adult and the more Bradley Cooper Sean Gunn he needs to be. But I think it was finding all of this balance between all of these was really interesting and a great challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many close-ups of all the animals, not just him, but like Lila and Teefs and everyone. And so what is it like capturing emotion in an animal's face like that? And you also have to take into consideration like their fur moving and everything. What was it like designing that?
Well, it is definitely a challenge, and I think it was a lot of work. We started to create what we called with Steph postcards, which is a key view of the different character into their environment. So this very dark cages environment. And I think the challenge was, these characters still need to bring a bit, well, especially Lila, we started with Lila, bring a bit of cuteness and life and emotion. And there is this contrast between this dark and brutal environment, which is the Arete spaceship and this cages environment by the High Evolution, and how to find the cuteness into this character. And so, of course, we started with sketches. So we knew already that, for example, Lila had mechanical arms and all of that. But I think what we tried to do was also studying a lot of authors' reference and what is it that makes them real, because I think the challenge was we didn't want to make it a Pixar character as well. You know, like he needed to still fit into a real world, real environment. So I think it was, again, a very subtle balance between a real author, the sketches, finding the cuteness. And then, like you said, an animal to emote is very, very hard. And there is lots of movies that prove how hard it is to emote when you are an animal. I think we are lucky enough that in Guardians, the animals are slightly more human. And so that gives us a license to try to bring emotion. But it's always a very subtle balance where as soon as you do too much, it starts looking weird. If you do not enough, you don't get the emotion. But of course, we were backed up by amazing performance from the actors that played Lila and Tiffs and of course Sean Gunn and Bradley Cooper for Rocket. So we were backed up with that. We were always looking back. So if you look at any of our animation submission, there were the performance of, for example, for Rocket, there were Sean Gunn, Bradley Cooper, some real raccoon, some animation. So there were lots and lots, and it was to find the right balance between all of that, which I think the animation supervisor on the show did really well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Guy and Theo, you guys worked on these new worlds we see in the film with a ready to high evolutionaries ship and orgoscope. Can you guys talk about designing those spaces? Guy, why don't we start with you?
So we helped build with the I always pronounce it wrong and I always get corrected.
The
I call it the
Arete,
but it's the Arete.
Arete.
Which is this 3-kilometer wide spaceship that we start seeing as like a 200-meter tall office building in the middle of a harbor. The challenge there was we knew that we had a lot of times that we're going to see it really close up, times we're going to see it really far away. We had to make sure that it was always a compelling image, and the production design for it was fantastic. So you're starting with something that looks absolutely gorgeous, and you can't just slap a building in there that has some red glass on it. So we're trying to leverage all that, almost jewelry-like imagery of it. So we started by figuring out the overall forms, figuring out how close we're going to see it in which specific shots. We realized early on that we're going to be so close that we can't just build it all. We had to come with a sort of city builder type system to propagate all this detail over the surface. But because it's such an interesting form, you can't just bomb a bunch of stuff onto it. You have to have areas that look more industrial, areas that look more glass, areas that, so we had all these different kind of steps to the process. And then we clad it in this beautiful red ruby glass, which was always fun to try to figure out how to shade, because you get into these, not to get too nerdy, but these mechanical problems with the way that noise resolution occurs, and also total internal refraction. And we did all sorts of tricks to try to polish that back out. But it makes for this really kind of fun backdrop for all this other action to take place, for the moment where Quill and Theo jump out the window. Yeah, so you have all that, it's rushing past you to help with a sense of scale.
Yeah.
Building that was actually kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. And then you get to destroy like the city in the background. Really.
I mean, we started with Steph went to Seattle and shot some really cool aerial plates, and the original goal was to try to leverage as much of that as possible into the final film. But just because of some of the distances and speeds involved, you're talking about a lot of these shots when we jump out of the ship, because it's 3 kilometers across. If it's out of the ground, then you're 3 kilometers in the air, and you start to get into a situation where helicopters will struggle. So we knew that early on we're going to have to build a lot of this as a CG city. So we went to our mapping department. We used OSM data to give us all the information about all the streets and all the buildings. And then you go through and you start pruning out certain buildings, because as much as you want it to be Seattle, you don't want it to be Seattle. so that you want to try to give it it's it's like it tickles your brain to know that you understand the city, but at the same time there's something just enough alien about it that
it's
Yeah,
counter Earth. It's
counter-Earth.
another place. Yeah, it's another place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
But then we set up a system to build the entire thing, sort of as 3D models. We propagated in millions of trees, all sorts of roads. It gives us the ability to see it from any angle, start dropping in cameras wherever we need to be. And then when you get to the destruction point, well, then you're just talking about a lot of work in the effects department.
Well, Theo, Orgoscope is a new planet. It's kind of gross, but also really pretty. There's this like lattice structure, but then there's like rubbery ground and like goo. So what was it like building that?
That was a pretty interesting challenge for sure. The concept artwork was really useful. It was definitely on this film more so than others. I think James pretty much has a pretty clear vision and he locks into what he wants early on. So that was really beneficial to us. Is pretty much here's the concept, implement it. But the real challenge was, seeing that at different scales and trying to understand that space when you're up close on the ground or we're really far away. So it's trying to, figure out how to represent those shapes and those objects so that you recognize them as the material, like it's bone or it's muscle, but sometimes you see it really close up, sometimes you see it really far away. And again, that challenge was like, how do you make it still register as that material, regardless of the distance you are from it? And it was very challenging just rendering because there's, huge, vast environments and lots of subsurface. So dealing with all those things and dealing with the noise was problematic, but it was definitely a fun challenge. No doubt.
And you also worked on Blurp, right?
Yes, Blurp or Fasaki. Yeah. Interesting character. They were pretty much locked into what they wanted, this kind of cute, fuzzy character. And it was more about the challenge was finding like how he moved. He has sort of non-standard anatomy. So, you look at reference in animals that have different types of joints or legs bent in different ways. But ultimately, you kind of have to find, you have to find the character a little bit. So that was a fun process, kind of working through that.
Yeah. You all worked on different sections of the film, but you're working with the same characters in all these sections. So I guess what is the process of like sharing assets like and the communication, the collaboration?
That's the thing. I mean, it's we have a lot of characters that are shared by everybody. Sometimes also some locations that are shared, or the Bowie, the spaceship, is shared. So now there's some very efficient pipelines for sharing assets between all the facilities, and all these guys, they've either worked together on other shows before, they know each other, or some of their teams know each other. So it's gone much easier, even though I don't like to use that term because it's nothing's easy in what we do. But it's gone a little bit more streamlined, I would say, to share assets, at least models, and not fur. Fur is a real difficult thing to share because all these guys have different render engines and all that stuff. We had also Cosmo on the film. That was a challenge that we have shared between some of the facilities and all that stuff. And it's also sharing the knowledge of how these characters behave. As you said, Theo has they started Blurp, but actually Guy ended up using it in a lot of shots, and so we had to establish the character very early on so that we could share the knowledge of how that character behaves and moves. And so it's not just about the technicality of how to open the files and then start working with them. It's also about the artistry of what is it that character is, what is it that environment looks like under certain light, certain lighting and things like that. So there's a technical aspect that is a little bit more streamlined, but there's also a lot of communication that as the supervisor of the film, I try to kind of nurture that idea that we're all working for the same film, and these guys are great at sharing these moments where we all get together on a Zoom, like exactly what we're doing now, and we're talking about, okay, that needs to be this way because let me show you this and that. And they're very, very, it's gone much better in the last I would say few years in terms of understanding everybody's on the same ship and we just want to make a good film together.
For sure. Well, lastly, what is it like working with James Gunn? Like I know he has a very specific vision and he knows what he wants, and I definitely get the sense that he knows how to like direct like visual effects, for a lack of a better term. So what was it like collaborating with him?
Well, it's very important for for me. we are a continuation of what's happening on set. And for example, for the cages, we shot on set for the first 2 days of shooting. We're actually shooting everything that was happening in the flashbacks in some sort of a virtual environment setting. But and James directs the actors, and then that goes to the team for Alexis or even Guy that did the big water sequence. And these scenes are so acting driven that I need to get the director in the room with the vendors. I mean, you guys had access to James as much as possible, and James literally directs the animators as he would direct the actors or the stunt people. He's very eloquent and he's very savvy in terms of what needs to be done and how to direct everybody and understand his vision. Is very precise. His editors have worked with him before, so it's all a group of people that have already worked with him, and we all understand what needs to be done pretty well. I open the doors and I have reviews with James, very often, and most of the time I try to bring the vendors, supervisors in those. If there is some very specific directing notes for the look stuff, it's a little bit more between us, and then I show James. But for everything that has to do with directing, acting, mostly acting, blocking, where the camera is, all these things, James is very, very involved into all of that.
Awesome. Well, it was great speaking with all of you guys. Thank you so much for your time, and congratulations again on the film.
Thank you.